Alright, so today we are going to be talking about the differences in miles. A lot of people like to say dollars per mile, and I like to use the words dollars per mile too. I like to have dollars per miles ratio for each of my orders, especially round trip, because I want to be as efficient as possible. I want to make as much money without using as little gas as possible. But not all miles are created equally. We got no traffic miles, we got stop and go traffic miles, we got medium traffic miles, we got miles that use a lot of brakes, we have miles that don't use brakes, we have miles with stoplights, miles without stoplights, and obviously the stoplights, you have to use more of the brakes, you have to use more of the acceleration, which will cause more wear and tear if you're just cruising on cruise control down a highway. So not all miles are created equal. So I got a little traffic map here, sort of indicating different levels of traffic. This is the Twin Cities area. And we got little pinpoints of where there's road closures, like right here in Maple Plain. All of 92 is closed. In St. Bonnie, 41, that's a road closure right here. That's a major one that makes Shakopee orders untakeable. Yeah, this has been closed for a while. There's a lot of congested traffic in Eden Prairie. I know Eden Prairie very well, but let's get through the different levels of miles. So if every restaurant were on Highway 212 and I were to decipher an order, let's just say that it's an order that's from this McDonald's right here, and I'm sitting directly in the parking lot at this McDonald's, and I were to go towards like somewhere along here. Let's just say the house is right off an exit ramp right there. I would be perfectly fine with $1 per mile on Highway 212 miles. It's very rare that there's highways that are this efficient to where I'd be perfect with $1 per mile. But this is one of the cases. $1 per Highway 212 mile is perfect because it takes very little time to get there. So the time that it takes to get there is very short. You go very fast on the highway. Like if I were to go from this point on Highway 212 and let's say to this point right here, see, it's 6 minutes to travel 7 miles, which is crazy. Because you're cruising at 70 miles an hour. Like I go 5 over the speed limit on most of these roads, if there's no traffic. But yeah, a lot of these miles are very quick. They're very short, or not very short. You go very fast on them. You're not using as much brake on these highways, so the mileage that you're using isn't going to wear as much on your car if you were to go, let's say, on 494, which 494 I'll get to in a sec. 494 is ridiculous. But yeah, 494 is an awful road. We'll all get to that. But 212 miles right here, I'd say I'd do $1 per mile, approximately. Good example of orders that I've actually taken that are a little bit less than $1 per mile that I'd like. That's mostly freeway miles that are not stop and go. Is the typical Eden Prairie to Hopkins miles. So if I were to go from Eden Prairie and let's say right here, and you're to go to Hopkins, it's 6.4 miles, and even like right here, it's 7 miles, but it only takes around 12 minutes to go there, and you're already at a hot spot after you drive there, because this is another hot spot area that's got a bunch of restaurants. This Knollwood Plaza, and downtown Hopkins also has a ton of restaurants there. And most of the miles that are driven are on freeway, low traffic miles. During rush hour traffic, I'm not usually too keen on driving on 169 because 169 is a bit more congested than during lunch period. So if it was a 3 o'clock period, I'd be a bit more strict on the mileage, but at the same time, I take orders that I don't usually take during the dead rush because the rush hour time is the dead rush. So I kind of do take a bit less strict orders because it's not as busy. It's not busy enough to be as strict as, let's say, the dinner rush, which the dinner rush I'm extremely strict on because that's super busy. I usually try to do orders that are extremely efficient that would for sure get me at 30 an hour, if not 40 an hour if the restaurant is ready and quick. But off to a tangent right there. Freeway, no traffic to little traffic miles are around like $1 to $1.15 per mile. That's where I'd like to have those. Highway 5 miles. So Highway 5, if I were to go on the street view, is a highway. There's not too much traffic on here. You can go. Oftentimes the stoplights are timed perfectly to where you can just zip through this whole highway, can cruise control at 60 miles an hour because the lights turn green at a rate to where they want to make this like a freeway sort of deal. But if I were to turn, let's say in downtown Chan, right on Great Plains, this is a complete different story. Like if I were to go on the Great Plains right here and take a left, it doesn't seem like it's that bad. But oftentimes, because of the light churnage, Great Plains is a different story. It is so bad to turn on it, and it takes forever to wait for the light to finally turn red because they try to make it into a freeway. But Highway 5 miles are a bit more strict than the Highway 212 miles. Highway 5 miles, I'd like to be at $1.20 to $1.50-ish, $1.40-ish per Highway 5 miles. So Highway 5 miles, like right here, you do use a little bit of brakes, you do stop at some stoplights, but it's not as bad as, let's say, like 494 traffic or like going through Prairie Center Drive. Those miles I'm more strict on. Especially when it was like really bad right here. Right there was straight up solid red when it was one lane. Heavily congested traffic. I'll get to that in a sec too. That's a different tier of mileage. But this is lighter traffic, but with stoplights and not as efficient, using a tiny bit of brakes, and you might need to use a bit of acceleration on there. Those I'd say is about $1.20 to $1.50-ish per mile. With Highway 5 miles, and let's say like Highway 62 miles. Without this construction, this would be Highway 7 miles, but Highway 7's a complete mess right now because they're doing construction on it. They're closing it down to one lane, as you can see, a bunch of red all over the place right there. Highway 7 is trash. But now let's get into our next tier of mileage, which is these are sort of normal streets with like 30 miles an hour sort of speed limits, maybe 40 miles an hour. This is like the Prairie Center Drive without construction, paired with maybe like Valley View Road type miles. And yeah, Valley View Road miles. Maybe Dell Road is another sort of a classification of it. Maybe this might be in the next tier. Downtown Chan's sort of a bit different. This is in a different tier. But these type of miles that aren't super congested, but you do have to stop a bit during non-rush hour times, during non-busy traffic times. I'd say these type of miles, I'd like to be at $1.50 to $1.70 per those miles. So those are sort of the average miles that I want to be in. That is sort of, or I'd say more of $1.40 to $1.70 per mile. So $1.40 plus is where I'd want to be per those miles, because those miles you do use a bit more brakes, you do use a bit more acceleration. Yeah, these, because you stop at these stoplights quite frequently, they can take a bit longer to get through as well. But there is a lot more wear and tear during those miles than, let's say, 212 miles, where on Highway 212, those miles are very quick and they don't use as much gas and they don't use as much brakes. So you're not wearing down your car as much. And your car's also not having to switch between gears for when you're changing speeds at those miles too. I have to mention this as well. When you slow down and you're stopping and you have to go again with the accelerator, your car is using more of the transmission as well. It's shifting the gears down. Since most people use automatics, people don't know about the gear shifting. I think most people do. If you don't know about gear shifting, then you're not very intelligent. Unless it's a CVT, which I don't know too much about CVTs. Those things I'm not a big fan of, but CVTs are like the one gear shifter. It's like a weird circle or gear circle thing. But on most automatic transmissions, when you slow down, you downshift to different gears. And then when you speed, you have to shift through different gears too, which causes more use of the transmission if you're to just cruise on one gear. So that's also a factor of wear and tear. But yeah, for these mostly moderate traffic with some stoplights and you know, maybe a little bit of congestion there, but not too much. It's not too bad. It's not a complete stop and go. There's areas where you're gonna have to stop, but for the most part, you have to go. I'd like to be $1.40 plus to possibly like $1.70 or something per those miles. Now we're gonna get to heavily congested garbage traffic, which 494 is a complete example of that. If I were to go to another gear, and I'd say 494 traffic. If I were to go to 494 traffic, yeah, see this type of trash right there, I want to be at least $2 per those miles. Actually, maybe even $3 per those miles. I have to be very, very, it has to be very high dollar per mile to travel on these roads of dollars per mile, because this type of trash, I don't even really drive on this if it's stop and go, but let's just say that you're just congregated, you're just forced to drive fully on this road. Like, let's say the restaurant is directly on 494 and 5, and you have to go to a house that's placed directly in the middle of 494 and 5. We'll just get at it with that because 494 and 5 during rush hour traffic is a complete mess. It is one of the worst roads in the entire state to drive on, especially this area. If this area was a full dollar per mile, to travel through this sector alone, I want to be at probably $3 per mile for that. I need to have an extremely high dollar per mile to justify driving on this crapshoot, this complete idiocracy of a street, of roads, of traffic, just all this garbage. Look at this. Why do so many people want to drive? There's so many people. There's 3 lanes. Why do so many people want to drive on 494? There's alternate routes too. Anyways, I need to get off my tangent on why 494 is so garbage to drive on. But those dollars per mile, the dollars that I have to drive for those miles are extremely high. For the north part of 494 is actually an example of 212 type miles. It seems like everybody exits off of 169 to go towards Shakopee or Hopkins, or maybe even like Belle Plaine areas, or they exit off of Come on, man. There we go. My computer was... Oh, yeah, and 169.2, that's another example. Those miles, that traffic is horrible, and it's just dangerous, too, because it seems like people that are coming from Shakopee or Belle Plaine or Jordan do not know how to drive properly. Way too many generalizations. Shakopee people are great, but... you'd have to be very high dollars per mile for me to justify driving on those heavily congested areas. And that's the same thing for Minneapolis area too. This area doesn't look too bad, but Minneapolis, there's a lot of traffic like right here. This is part of the reason why I never go towards Minneapolis, because of they got a lot of stupid road closures, like right there. Downtown, as you can see, is a mess with more road closures. There's a bunch of parking garbage, like all these restaurants, as you can see. There's no place to park for them. Like, you can't just park right next to the restaurant. You got to go onto the side of the road. They got like all sorts of crap. Like, as you can see right here, a bunch of one-ways and crap. See, you can't park there. You have to go to these paid parking ramps to park. So you're just gonna I don't ever go there. I never want to know how parking works for DoorDash in downtown Minneapolis. But all these heavily congested areas, I require more dollars per mile than any other place. Like $2 to $3 per mile. Probably not even $2 for heavily congested traffic. It's gotta be $3 per mile. Because not only is it super slow, like if I were to go from here to here, it would take 7 minutes to travel 1 mile. 7 minutes. 10 minutes to travel 1.2 miles. That is legit, let's see, if it was 9 minutes per mile, 9 times 60... or 6, yeah, that'd be legit 6 miles per hour you're driving on it. And the 6 miles per hour you're driving on average is using acceleration, then using your brake, using acceleration some more, then using more brakes to come to a complete stop. So you're wearing your car out like a lot by traveling those miles. Those miles, you're wearing out your car because your car is using more transmission utilization by shifting the gears. Your car is just being worked harder in those driving conditions because you're using more acceleration, you're using more of the brakes, you're using more gas because you're accelerating harder. You're not just cruising, you're using more acceleration. Those miles you have to be extremely strict on, as opposed to Highway 212, which those miles I consider a third of those miles. So yes, I have to say, here we go, right here. I am completely done with this video. I've gone on way too much. And these are also round trip miles too. Like if it's like, if I am going like $6 and I have to travel like 2 miles, I consider 2 miles there and 2 miles back the amount of miles I'll be driving, unless it's towards an exact hot spot. But I consider dollars per mile being the dollars per mile round trip. But yes, I am done with this video about miles. I just want to sort of give a idea of the differences of the miles. I don't know about the exact numbers too much. Maybe it's a bit more, maybe it's a bit less. I'm not exact sure on the dollars per those type of miles. I don't have a set amount of, it's got to be this exact dollar per this mile on this specific road as I'm analyzing the graph and it's 1 decimal point per mile off. I'm not like that. I don't judge that much because there is a bit of a mix. Like if I were to go from, let's say, Chanhassen High School right here, and I were to drive over towards Fat Pants Brewing Company, you got a lot of the 212 miles, but you got some Lyman Boulevard miles, which I kind of consider the Lyman Boulevard miles to be kind of like Highway 5 miles. And then you got the Prairie Center Drive miles. And this half a mile is kind of like congested traffic miles, depending on how backed up the stoplight is. If I were to go on Flying Cloud, that's heavily congested miles. Every mile that you take when you take different orders, unless it's on one specific road, is going to be completely different. But yes, that's a video about miles. I need to get going on my editing right now for this video. Yeah, I just need to get that out there about miles. And sort of how my brain goes and calculates through miles, because I'm not as strict on miles as most people are when it comes to decent roads that are not congested at all and you got to go cruise control on them. I'm not strict on those miles, but these miles right here, these miles and these miles right here, and especially these miles, and 100% especially these downtown Minneapolis fiasco miles, I'm very strict on. But yes, that's it for this video. So yes, bye.